You have been told the flood in Genesis was meant to wipe out sinful humans. You have never heard what actually happened. The ancient world believed the flood was a targeted military strike against a race of cannibalistic giants sired by rogue angels. By the end of this script, you will understand exactly why the ancient authorities erased the Book of Enoch from history. Let us look at the Sunday school version of the ancient world. Humanity eats forbidden fruit, humanity gets wicked, God sends rain, and Noah builds a boat. It is neat, it is simple, and it completely ignores the bizarre text hiding right before the flood story. Genesis chapter 6 introduces a group called the Sons of God. They see human women, decide they are attractive, and take them as wives. The offspring of this unholy union are the Nephilim. Nephilim is a Hebrew word that translates roughly to the fallen ones. These were the giants, the heroes of old, the men of renown. Immediately after this strange cosmic scandal, God destroys the world. The Bible gives you exactly 4 verses about this event. It drops a massive bombshell about giant offspring and moves on without explaining anything. For thousands of years, everyday readers have asked exactly what happened here. The ancients did not have to guess. They had the entire backstory written down in a blockbuster text known as the Book of Enoch. Enoch is a fleeting character in the book of Genesis. The text says he was the great-grandfather of Noah. It also says he walked with God. And then he was no more, because God took him. That is it. He does not die an ordinary death. He simply vanishes into the heavens. In the ancient world, an exit like that demands a prequel. The Book of Enoch fills in the gaps, serving as a massive, 5-part ancient encyclopedia of the supernatural. It is an apocryphal text. Apocrypha is a Greek word that basically means things hidden away. Today, it mostly means books the church decided you should not read. The first and most famous section is called the Book of the Watchers. It explains that 200 angels, known as the Watchers, made a pact on Mount Hermon. They abandoned their heavenly station to descend to earth. Their leader was named Semyaza, but the most infamous among them was Azazel. These angels did not just interbreed with humanity. They brought forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught men how to forge swords, shields, and breastplates. He taught humanity the art of war. He taught women how to make cosmetics, use mirrors, and wear jewelry. Other angels taught humans astrology, meteorology, and the use of root cuttings for medicine and magic. In the Book of Enoch, humanity is not inherently evil. Humanity is corrupted by advanced, forbidden technology handed down by rogue cosmic beings. The union of these angels and human women produced the Nephilim. According to the Book of Enoch, these were not just unusually tall men, they were towering monsters. They devoured all the food humanity could produce. When the food ran out, they turned on the humans. When they finished devouring humans, they began cannibalizing each other and drinking blood. The earth literally cried out in pain. The archangels Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel heard the screaming from heaven. They appealed to God, and God initiated a massive cleanup operation. The flood was not a punishment for a few people behaving badly. It was a tactical extermination protocol designed to rid the earth of a parasitic, violent hybrid race. The rogue angels were bound in chains and buried beneath the desert until the day of judgment. Enoch, the man who vanished into heaven, was appointed as the middleman. He was sent to the imprisoned angels to read them their doom. This is a spectacular narrative. It completely changes the theology of the Old Testament. It answers every lingering question left by the brief mention in Genesis. During the Second Temple period, this book was a cultural phenomenon. The Second Temple period covers the 500 years between the Old and New Testaments. Ancient Judaism experienced a massive explosion of new apocalyptic ideas during this time. The Book of Enoch was not considered fringe literature by the ancient Jewish people. It was wildly popular. Copies of it were distributed everywhere. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in the middle of the 20th century, they found the library of an isolated Jewish sect. In that desert cave, they found more fragments of the Book of Enoch than they did of many biblical books. It was more widely read than the Book of Proverbs or the Book of Joshua. The early Christians loved it just as much. The New Testament authors were clearly obsessed with Enoch's theology. The Apostle Peter talks about the angels who sinned being cast into gloomy dungeons. That is not in Genesis. That is straight out of Enoch. The book of Jude literally quotes the book of Enoch word for word. Jude presents it as authoritative scripture. Jesus himself refers to the Son of Man, a heavenly figure who will judge the earth. That exact title and concept is developed heavily in the Book of Parables, the second section of the Book of Enoch. For the first 300 years of Christianity, the Book of Enoch was highly respected. Theologians like Tertullian and Irenaeus treated it as divine revelation. They used it to explain the existence of demons. If the flood wiped out the physical bodies of the Nephilim giants, where did their spirits go? Enoch explains that the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim became the demons that wander the earth today. It was the perfect theological puzzle piece. Then, the political and religious climate shifted completely. A council of ancient leaders deciding what you can read, what could go wrong. Following the destruction of the Jewish temple by the Romans in the year 70, Rabbinic Judaism began to consolidate its texts. The rabbis needed a unified, purely Hebrew set of scriptures to survive in exile. The Book of Enoch was heavily associated with apocalyptic sects and the newly formed Christian movement. It also contained a massive theological problem for strict monotheism. In traditional Judaism, God is entirely sovereign. Humans have free will, and humans choose to sin. The Book of Enoch blamed the origin of evil on rebellious angels, shifting the blame away from human agency. Furthermore, the text was primarily circulating in Aramaic and Greek, not the sacred Hebrew of the Torah. The Jewish rabbis quietly dropped it from their official canon. The Christian Church, which originally championed the book, soon followed suit. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, the Church was establishing formal theology. Scholars wanted Christianity to look intellectually rigorous to the Greek and Roman philosophers. A book about angels lusting after human women and breeding cannibalistic giants was becoming a serious public relations disaster. It felt mythological. It felt entirely pagan. More translation debates followed. Everyone's favorite reason to start a historical war. The brilliant theologian Julius Africanus proposed a radical new reading of Genesis chapter 6. He suggested that the sons of God were not angels at all. He argued they were simply the human descendants of Seth, the righteous son of Adam. He claimed the daughters of men were the human descendants of Cain, the wicked son of Adam. In this new interpretation, the great sin was simply righteous humans marrying unrighteous humans. The giants were written off as a mere metaphor or a genetic anomaly. St. Augustine, arguably the most influential theologian in Western Christianity, aggressively adopted this view. Augustine found the idea of spiritual beings having physical biology completely absurd. He declared that angels do not have physical bodies, and therefore they cannot reproduce. He branded the Book of Enoch as unreliable fable. Once Augustine drew the line, the rest of the Western Church fell in behind him. Enoch was systematically excluded from the official biblical canon at the councils of Rome and Carthage. It was not violently burned in a grand conspiracy. It simply stopped being copied. In the ancient world, if a manuscript was not actively hand-copied by scribes, it vanished into dust. By the Middle Ages, the Western world had completely forgotten the Book of Enoch existed. It became a ghost text, Scholars knew it had existed because the New Testament quoted it, but no one had seen a copy for centuries. For 1,000 years, scholars thought this text was lost forever. Then came a massive historical plot twist. The book had not vanished at all. It had been safely preserved in the highlands of Africa. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never received the memo that Enoch was banned. They were isolated from the theological squabbles of Rome and Constantinople. They continued to read Enoch, venerate it, and copy it faithfully in their liturgical language of Ge'ez. They considered it completely canonical. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce traveled to Ethiopia to find the source of the Nile. He returned to Europe carrying 3 copies of the complete Book of Enoch. The European academic establishment was utterly shocked. At first, they assumed it was a medieval forgery. They could not believe an ancient apocryphal text had survived fully intact. Scholars spent the next century arguing over its authenticity. Many claimed it was written after the New Testament, heavily plagiarizing Jude and Peter. Then, a shepherd threw a rock into a cave. In 1947, Bedouin goat herders discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. Hidden inside Cave 4 were unmistakable, fragmentary manuscripts of the Book of Enoch, written in ancient Aramaic. Paleography, the study of ancient handwriting, dated these fragments to at least 200 years before the birth of Jesus. The Ethiopian texts were completely vindicated. They were not medieval fakes. They were highly accurate translations of a genuine, ancient Jewish masterpiece. The discovery forced modern scholars to completely reevaluate the history of the Bible. The erasure of Enoch was not a malicious cover-up orchestrated by a shadowy cabal. It was a theological evolution. Early church leaders simply grew uncomfortable with a chaotic, supernatural worldview that they could no longer explain or control. They preferred a neat, philosophical universe over a terrifying cosmos filled with rogue watchers and bloodthirsty giants. They removed the context. They sanitized the narrative. Good luck to the ancient translators who tried to make it make sense without the backstory. When you read the Bible today, you are reading a curated library. You are reading the texts that survived the theological filters of Augustine and the rabbinic councils. But the ghost of Enoch remains in the pages. Every time you read about the Nephilim, the demons, or the final judgment, you are reading the echoes of the watchers. The ancient authors of the Bible assumed you knew the whole story. They assumed you knew about Azazel, the corruption of earth, and the cosmic war. We lost the script, and we forgot the stakes. The text has not changed. You have. Now you know what they actually meant. Subscribe if you enjoyed this deep dive. It means a lot.